Hey guys, on a previous video we talked about change in Japan, and on that video, and actually on some other videos that we've made previously and since, it's been mentioned that Japanese society in general is reluctant to change, and most people in Japan are reluctant to change. They just like things the way they are and don't really want anything to change. And so generally that's good, of course, because there's so many good things about Japanese society that we wouldn't like to see change. So generally that's a good thing. However, as you've seen over the years on our videos, there are some things in Japanese society that they want to change. And again, as outsiders, as foreigners living in Japan, you know, it's not really up to us to try and change Japan or want to change Japan, or, you know, so some foreigners seem to disagree with that. Some foreigners feel strongly that they can come here and try and change things, and that's fine too. That's up to them. But when we talk about change and problems that want to be changed, usually it's the problems that Japanese people themselves are saying they want to change. So, for example, we talked previously about English in Japan, and the Japanese government have been saying for a number of years that they want Japan to improve the English skills of the younger people in particular, because they know that they're failing abysmally, basically, when tests are done around the world to test the English levels of people using English as a second language. You know, a lot of the European countries are at the top, and then it goes down the list, you know, and then down below South Korea, and maybe even below China, and below just about everybody is Japan. It's something like, on most of those tests, it's usually like Japan comes like 28th in the world or something, which, considering that their students here spend more time studying than anybody else, is really amazing. And it's really, we actually made videos about this previously. It's because the way that English is taught here, it just doesn't work. You know, they try and memorize it, basically. Here are a bunch of books about English, try and memorize these, and then we'll give you a test later to see how you went. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. And instead of looking at how English is learned in other countries and going, right, we're way off track, we're doing it in a totally different way, and it's just not working. And instead of going to, you know, Europe's a good example, because, you know, there's a lot of people in Europe who speak English as a second language much better than some of us speak as a first language, you know. And Europe would be a great place to start. Go there and work out why it is that European people can speak English so well, and yet people here fail so badly. Or if they don't want to go for such a long plane flight, maybe just pop over to South Korea, where they score better than the Japanese students do. So, you know, obviously it needs to be reformed. However, what we see instead of that, which should be, now see, if you're open to change, you'd send the education minister, or, you know, his sidekick, over to these other countries and learn why their systems of teaching English are better than the Japanese system is. And again, I just want to remind, there's always someone who doesn't pay attention to this style of conversation, and who then says, why do you think they should learn English? They don't have to learn English. Again, just repeating for that person who's not paying attention, the Japanese government keeps saying they want to improve the English level in Japan. This isn't us saying that they should. Okay, there's always someone, Japan's Japanese, they should speak Japanese, they shouldn't have to speak English. No one's saying they have to speak English. What it is the Japanese government saying they want more people in Japan to speak English, because they know that's the best way to do business and communicate with the world at the moment. And that's what they want to do. So the Japanese government is trying to find ways to improve English here. So instead of doing that, instead of studying how it's done in other countries and learning from that, they get these sort of stopgap type reactions to it, sort of these, you know, band-aid type things. So some of the things that we've seen over the last few years has been more tests. So the government announced a few years ago, okay, we want the English level to improve in Japan, so before people go to university, we're going to give them all English tests, which, you know, as most educators know, You know, giving people tests doesn't teach people anything. All it's going to do is just reinforce what we already know, and that's that the English level's really low. It's only going to show us how badly we're doing. It's not going to improve how well we're doing, right? So that's not a solution to the problem. That's just measuring how big the problem is. Not going to help at all. And the other one we see a lot of is trying to solve it with technology. Instead of just saying, look, it's a communication thing, you know, a language is a communication thing, we need to learn it that way. And those of you who speak a second language would know that. You know, you can't get a book and memorize a language. You know, it's just, you know, there's a lot of words in languages. There's a lot of grammar. You're not going to just memorize it, you know. And so instead of recognizing that it's the human thing and we solve it with proper education, then they try and turn to technology. So we're always seeing on TV ads, or not always ads, but just people talking about new applications. Appuris, they call them, appuris, a new app for the smartphone that can translate English for you, translate Japanese into English and English into Japanese for you. And of course, you know, first of all, those applications tend to fail really badly. You know, we get the occasional Japanese person who watches our videos using the Google Translate feature, and of course it fails. And then they get all pissed off because they haven't understood what we said, misunderstood and thought we were saying something else. So the appuri doesn't work, but we still see a lot of them, and there's always people, quite often because we're English speakers, people show us, oh look, what do you think of this? I've got this appuri on my phone, and we usually test it out for them. And you know, for a single word by word translation, that sort of technology is going to work, isn't it? You know, you can translate the word bread into pan, and you know, jitenchi into bicycle. You know, for a word by word translation, it's going to work, but you're not going to communicate with other human beings properly using an appuri on your smartphone, are you? So obviously it's not going to work. And the other one's games. We see this all the time as well. They recognize that learning a language is really, really hard. So what we see advertised all the time is these games. Games and CDs and things like that are advertised on TV all the time. Let's learn English, you know. And then they have some kid who's obviously been raised in the US, who's got a American accent, saying, I really like playing this game, you know, and trying to give the impression that kid's learnt fluent English from playing some game, you know, it's some you know, internet type game, or some TV game they play on the TV, or a PSP type game or something like that, where they're going to learn English easily just sitting there for a couple of hours every afternoon playing this game. They're going to learn fluent English. And of course, you know, any of you that speak a second language is going to know that none of those things are going to work. You know, they're all sort of good tools, and they're sort of good to get people interested in a language, but you know, obviously they're not adequate. They're not going to do it. You know, the real solution is to go and actually learn how to communicate in English properly and treat it like a communication tool rather than something that we memorize. So it's just an example of how problems are dealt with here. Trying to solve the problem without changing anything. So let's not change the way English is taught. Let's not mess with that. We don't want to change that, because we've already got these, you know, syllabus in schools and teachers in schools teaching a certain way, teachers in Juku teaching a certain way. Let's not mess with that. Let's just do these other peripheral things instead, which of course doesn't change anything. You know, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? If you want to improve anything, if you've got a problem and you need to improve it, you know, chewing around the edges of it isn't going to fix it, is it? And that tends to be what they do. So another couple of examples of that is, actually this is a really sad example. We've just come to the end of the summer holidays, and there was a thing on the news here that at the end of the summer holidays, the number of suicides from high school kids goes up, which, you know, the actual statistic was that there's suicides by high school kids every week, but that they increase at the end of the holidays, because what happens, the kids have just had a summer holiday, most of which they spend at Juku anyway, but then they're coming back to school again, but get back to the work level increasing back to 100% again, and they don't want to go back, basically, for whatever reason. So a lot of kids kill themselves at the end of the summer holidays, which is just terrible, isn't it? You know. And so instead of obviously that means they've got a huge problem, right? It means that the school system and the juku thing, and we've talked about this before. You know, the kids don't have any lives. A lot of them. You know, they just go to school, go to juku, go to club, go to school, go to juku, go to club. Summer holiday comes around. What are you doing during the summer holidays? Going to school, going to juku, going to club. It's the same thing. That's all they do. You're not all of them. Not all of them. There's some kids who do things with their families, but a lot of them just don't. That's all they do. They just study and study and study, and that's all they do. That's all they do. Fall asleep at juku and play games at juku and fall asleep at juku and go home at 10 o'clock at night. It's just sad. And obviously that is driving a lot of high school kids to killing themselves. And so instead of saying, look, we really need to have a good look at this, you know, our kids are killing themselves because we're putting too much pressure on them, how about we start to encourage, you know, less work and more free time for the kids, instead of approaching it like that. Or again, instead of going and looking at the rest of the world and saying, why is it that their suicide rates amongst teenagers are lower than ours, and learning from that and coming back and making some real changes, instead of doing that, no, their solution to that was to start a group that will have telephone counselling for high school kids. Which, again, it's not really addressing the problem and trying to solve the problem, is it? It's just trying to nibble around the edges of the problem, hoping that some of those kids... Now, Japanese people, as we've talked about many times before, you know, talking to other people about your problems is not something that Japanese people do, usually. You know, and talking to a total stranger about your problems, calling a total stranger on the phone to talk about your problems and tell them you're thinking of killing yourself, cannot imagine it happening. You know, and if this group starts their suicide helpline, you can probably assume that there's going to be a bunch of people sitting in a room waiting for the phone to ring, and it probably won't ring. It probably won't ring because for the reasons we've talked about before. You know, we've talked before that Japanese people don't like talking about their problems, and we've talked before that suicide is considered to be a reasonable option almost in Japan. The taboos about it and all the things that discourage people from doing it in some other societies don't exist here. And in popular culture here with the, you know, manga and movies and things, quite often the hero or the heroine kills themselves. So it's often seen as a quite reasonable solution to a problem. And I mean, that's obviously what needs to be addressed. And having a couple of people sitting in a room somewhere waiting for the phone to ring, obviously is not going to change it. You know, you can't imagine that next year the statistics are going to be much lower. Much fewer people will kill themselves because a couple of counsellors were manning a telephone somewhere. You know, not saying that doing something is better than doing nothing. I mean, obviously something is better than nothing, but you can see the point. When you live here, when you're here all the time, you see this sort of thing all the time. I mean, this is on a national scale that we're talking about, and you see lots of stuff on a national scale just like this. And then there's a lot of stuff on a small scale that you'll see just in your own local area or just in your own family, if you've got Japanese family, and you'll see this all the time, that there's a problem, and instead of really making some changes and fixing it, they sort of trying to find ways to solve the problem without changing anything, is basically what it is, which is a real struggle, obviously, isn't it? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, you know, the English level doesn't improve, the suicide rate doesn't go down. Another example, this is a bit more lighthearted, this one. So when you drive in Japan, there's a few things. Most of the cars that you rent don't have English-speaking navigation systems, or sometimes they'll have English-speaking navigation systems that will actually say turn left at the next corner. You can actually change the settings so they'll speak in English, but you can't set them in English, most of them. So when you come to set them, you've got to be able to read and write kanji, to put kanji into the system to set the address of the place you're going, or to just read what you know, through the menu, read the menu for the Navi system. You need to be able to read Japanese, right? So most of the systems aren't English friendly, and then sometimes, occasionally they are. There is a couple available on our English friendly directory. We've got a couple there, but usually from a rent-a-car company they're not. The rent-a-car companies usually aren't. if you walk in to rent a car, usually all the conversation with the staff is in Japanese and all the forms are in Japanese. So it's all very well to turn up with your international driver's license, but then, you know, the car rental place isn't English friendly, and so car rental place isn't English friendly, the navigation system isn't English friendly, and then a lot of the signs aren't English friendly. So the street signs. So sometimes, like this one we're coming up to here, they'll have Japanese and then underneath they'll have Romaji. So you can read it. You can read it in Romaji. So sometimes, but often they don't. And often on the highways, you'll be driving along the highway and there are these huge signs on the highway and the big intersection coming up, and they've got signs pointing at arrows pointing all over the place, and it's all in Japanese. There's nothing in English, and no hint at all, right? And even in the big cities, that often happens too. And you're trying to find the entrance. Okay, the train station's here. Where's the car park? And where's this? Or where's City Hall? Or where's this? And quite often it's all in Japanese and it's nothing in English, right? So these things all add up, and the end result of it is that it can be really tricky for foreigners to drive in Japan, right? So with 2020 Olympics coming up, you know, they're sort of making all these voices, making all these comments about how they want to improve things for the foreigners, right? And again, instead of actually making real changes that will really help anybody, they come up with funny solutions. So this one, instead of saying, okay, look, we need to get onto all the rent-a-car companies and get them to put their forms into English, and you know, not hard, is it, to have one set of forms in Japanese and one in English saying exactly the same thing, or even just one piece of paper explaining what the Japanese form says, so that you know what it says before you sign it, or, you know, and a navigation system. There are navigation systems available that you can set in English. They are available, but they don't install them into most of the rent-a-cars. So that's the sort of stuff they need to address. And then the street signs, and say, look, if we put the street signs in Romaji, this isn't just for English speakers, this is for everybody. If you put street signs in Romaji, people coming from anywhere in the world whose alphabet works on a Romaji system, so it's all the people in Europe and, you know, South America and lots of people around the world who use the Roman alphabet, can come here and read street signs, which would be a logical solution to the problem, wouldn't it, right? No, that hasn't been what's proposed. What they've proposed is that they make stickers. They make stickers for the cars that sort of have a warning sign on them that says, warning, foreigner driving, right? This is true story, it's true story. A sticker that goes, because they've already got stickers here that you stick on the car if you're a beginner, okay? So they've got a green and yellow sticker that you put on the car if you're a beginner, and they've got another sticker that's sort of yellow and green and something else that you put on the car if you're over 65. And then they're proposing that they have this sticker, and the head, the idea is that it has an image on it of a foreigner. Now, I haven't actually seen that yet, but you can imagine. Let's make the foreigners feel really welcome. Have a picture of an alien, right? You know, an alien with little antenna sticking out the top of his head, and then in Japanese it's written, warning, foreigner driving. Warning, foreign driver. And so the idea is that because the foreigners are so baffled about where they're going and have no idea where they're going, and there's no signs for them, and they can't work out where they are, and the navvy doesn't speak English, and because they can't work out where they are and they're having such a hard time, they might be stopping and starting a bit and pissing off the Japanese drivers, okay? So the brilliant plan they've come up with is instead of actually solving the problems that the foreign drivers have and will have during the Olympic Games, what they're going to do is just give everybody a sticker, and the Japanese people will see this annoying person in front of them who has no idea where they're going, and they'll say, oh look, I see that it's a foreign driver. Ah, of course. which is hard to see how that's going to help anybody. And in actual fact, I mean, those of us who live here, the last thing you want to do, you know, as if we don't feel alienated enough, and as if we're not treated differently enough already, the last thing we want is to drive around with a sticker on our car saying, warning, foreigner driving. So it's just tragic. I mean, that one you got to laugh at that one. It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Seriously, that's the best solution you could come up with to that problem? But see, again, they don't want to change anything. They don't want to change the fact that the forms are only in Japanese. And this is that particular topic. That's an amazing thing. You know, to get a form, a translation of a form. You know, we recommend to you guys Shinsei Bank in Japan has a English-friendly online banking system, which is really good. So if you're living in Japan, Shinsei Bank is a really good banking system that you can use in English, and they also loan to foreigners. However, now and again, if you have to get a form from them, they might post you a form in the mail, or if you want to apply for a loan or something like that, it's all in. And again, we're not saying they have to use English, but they're a bank that advertises that they're foreigner friendly and that they're English friendly, right? And in actual fact, they're probably the most English friendly bank in Japan. But when it comes to the forms are only in Japanese, which means they're claiming to be English friendly, but their most important forms are only in Japanese. And it wouldn't be hard to have translators translate those forms into English, and even either give you a copy in English or just have it on the website, so that when you're about to fill out the form, you can look on the website and here's a translation of that loan application, so you can read through it and see what it is that you're signing if you can't read Japanese. And it wouldn't be hard to do, would it? It wouldn't take a lot of their time or money to organise to have these forms. You know, we transferred some money internationally recently, and a form turned up in the mail, you know, from Shinsei, and it's addressed to the foreigner, you know, and in English, and then it's got this form in Japanese with no translation. And because in our house we're okay with that, but it's like, here's this company we recommend as being English friendly, sending out these forms in purely Japanese. And again, it's exactly like we talked about in that change video. Change, nobody here wants change. You know, in that bank, the staff working in the office and their bosses and the directors of the bank and everybody concerned and all the other customers and everybody concerned, nobody wants anything to change. Nobody's comfortable with change. Nobody wants anything to change. So that's why when you come up with a problem like that, they're not interested. And in actual fact, when we filled out that form and sent it back to them, we actually included a letter from English Friendly Japan saying this to them, that it wouldn't be hard for you to include a translation of your form when you send it to non-Japanese people, and didn't get a response. And that's the Japanese response to something like that. They don't want to talk about it. I'm just going to cover you up because you're going to get hot there over the next couple of minutes in the sun. You all right? Sorry about that. So yeah, that's the typical Japanese response to a sort of a suggestion that something be changed, is nobody wants to talk about that. Let's not talk about that. We don't talk about that. And so this is what you see all the time. So if you spend a little bit of time in Japan, or if you live in Japan, you'll experience this all the time. And you know, there's a problem, and they come up with these funny solutions. You know, oh geez, the foreigners are having trouble driving here because of this, and this. Well, let's just put a sticker on their car saying this guy's having a hard time driving here because he's a foreigner, and that'll help in some way, you know. Or you know, they can't speak English, so let's give them another test. That'll fix it. So it's funny, these sort of the reaction. Let's try and solve the problem without changing anything. That's the problem. That's what they're trying to do, of course. Let's solve the problem, but don't change anything. And so nothing changes here. And that's why we got these bureaucratic systems here that are just insane. And we waste paper, reams and reams of paper all the time with filling out forms that aren't necessary. And if you ask Japanese people about these things, why do we do that? We already did that 3 times. Why do we have to fill out that form again? We already did that form 3 times. Oh, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's just the way they do it. Yeah, but nobody's going to use that form. No, that's right. They're just going to throw it away, but that's just the way it is. And everybody just accepts it. They're used to it, see? Their whole life's been like that. That if there's and everybody feels the same. Everybody understands that they don't want change. Nobody wants anything to change. So if there's a problem, you just accept the problem. And then occasionally they get these little people come up with these little things that they'll do to sort of try and hide the problem. Really, most of those solutions that we talked about there are really just sort of trying to patch up the problem. Put the alien sticker on the foreigner card. That'll on the foreigner's car. That'll make him feel good. Really help us blend in. Anyway, remember, just quickly, so you might remember, a long time ago, years ago, they had a big conference in Japan, in Tokyo, about, and the topic of the conference was how to help foreigners assimilate in Japan. Was the topic of the conference, right? You know, there are foreigners in Japan who are heads of companies, who speak and read and write Japanese perfectly. There's foreigners in Japan who are professors at universities who speak and read and write Japanese fluently. There's foreigners all through Japanese society at all levels, of course, right? Of course. And you know that conference that was about foreigners, helping foreigners assimilate in Japan, no foreigners were invited to it. That was a classic of this. That was a few years ago, but that was a funny one. And the foreign community then talked about it quite a bit, because everybody just laughed at it. It was like, yeah, that's typical, isn't it? You know, let's have this thing and talk about how can we help the foreigners assimilate, feel like they're part of what's going on. Didn't think to invite any of us, because of course we could tell them. We could tell them, well, if you really want to know, this would be good, this would be good, this would be helpful, this would be helpful. But they didn't want that. They didn't want a bunch of foreigners turning up talking about changing stuff. We don't want to change stuff. We want the foreigners to assimilate without changing anything. And again, we're not saying, again, for that one person who never listens, or 20 people who never listen, those people who never listen, we're not saying anything should change. We're not saying anyone should speak English. We're not saying these problems should be fixed. None of that. These videos are purely observational, what we observe. That's what we've observed. Anyway, that was coffee time. More videos coming soon.